In Minnesota, an eligible voter can register or update their registration on Election Day. In order to do so, they must have one of the following: an ID with current name and address, a photo ID plus a document with current name and address, a registered voter who can confirm your address, also known as a voucher, a college student ID along with a housing list, which isn't very common in Washington County, a valid registration in the precinct, notice of late registration letter, or staff from a residential facility that can note that that resident lives there. Your Election Day Registration Judge folder contains the following information: instructions to complete these duties, samples, forms, as well as signs. Please post these signs at the Election Day registration table. The signs include a confidentiality notice, an oath from the EDR application, as well as proof of residence documents and how they can properly meet these requirements. You'll also find signs indicating the age that a voter must be in order to vote on Election Day. Please post these signs at the EDR table. We'll now discuss the registration process on Election Day. Before having a voter complete the voter registration application, please check the greeter list again. If the voter's current name and current residential address is on the greeter list, send the voter to the roster table. They should sign in there. If the voter is not on the greeter list, please ask the voter verbally for their current address. Do not have them complete any paperwork until you've confirmed that they're in the correct precinct. To do this, you'll use the Precinct Finder, which contains the street addresses within your precinct. You'll use the Precinct Finder to check the voter's street and house range. The column labeled OEB stands for odd, even, or both. This refers to the house numbers within the address range. Please be sure you watch this carefully, as sometimes one side of the street is in one precinct and the other side of the street is in another precinct. If their address and house range is not in the Precinct Finder, then please check your City Precinct Finder and Polling Location List, which are located in the Head Judge folder. Once you've verified that the address is inside your precinct, please verify the proof of residence that the voter intends to use. The proof of residence must be listed on the Election Day registration Proofs of Residence form. If a voter cannot provide an acceptable proof of residence, they cannot register to vote. Please track how many voters leave without registering on the incident log. We would like you to encourage people to leave and gather the necessary documents and return later in the day to vote. Once you've verified that the voter's name and current residential address is not on the greeter list, and also that their address is on your precinct finder, as well as that they have an acceptable proof of residence with them, please hand them an Election Day registration application. Information on this document is data private. Please do not allow voters to scan through applications or the EDR roster while they are waiting. Please ask the voter to print their information and verify that you are able to read it. Please also verify that the voter has signed the application towards the bottom. Please note that a power of attorney cannot sign for a voter. If the voter is unable to sign the application, have them make their mark on the signature line. Once the voter has completed their Election Day registration application, the election judge needs to complete the ward, precinct, school district, as well as initial on the bottom in box A. If a voter is using an ID with current name and current address, the election judge will indicate that in section B of the bottom of the form. If the voter is using a photo ID plus a document to prove their current name and current address, please complete section C on the bottom of the form. Finally, if the voter is using a voucher, a late notice, a previous registration, or a student ID, please use section D of this form. Once the Election Day registration form is complete, the voter must sign the EDR roster. Blank roster pages are delivered with the registered voter roster. On the EDR roster, the voter will need to print their name, sign their name, print their address, as well as print their date of birth. Please be sure that this information is legible, as we will use this information to input into the state voter registration system. Once they've signed the roster, the election judge should hand the voter the proper ballot receipt. If your precinct has multiple school districts, please use the greeter list to identify the correct school district for that voter and hand them the corresponding voter receipt. Now we will discuss the various forms of identification or proof of residence that a voter can show to register on Election Day. When a voter is using a current Minnesota driver's license or Minnesota ID card, you will need to verify the following: the photo on the Minnesota ID, their date of birth and verify that they are 18 on Election Day. Ensure that the residential address is in your precinct finder. Finally, check that the expiration date on the ID has not passed. In this example, the election judge will complete the official use only section of the Election Day registration form by initialing and then checking the box that says Minnesota ID or receipt for one. Finally, the election judge will print the driver's license number on the corresponding line. A voter can use a tribal identification card with the voter's current name and their current address. In this example, the election judge in the official use only section of the EDR form would initial and then check the box tribal ID. A voter could also use a student identification card with the voter's current name and current address on it. You will need to check for the voter's name, that their address listed on the ID is in the precinct finder, as well as the voter's date of birth. A voter who changes their name or their address but still resides in the same precinct can use their former registration to update their voter record. The voter will need to complete an EDR form, and the election judge will locate the voter's name and voter ID number using the greeter list. In this example, in the official use only section of the Election Day registration form, the election judge will initial and then check the box valid registration in the same precinct. Then, fill in the voter ID number from the greeter list in the corresponding line. If a voter registers after the pre-registration deadline, they will receive a letter like the one on the screen. This letter indicates where their polling location is. The voter will need to complete a voter registration application, and this letter serves alone as their proof of residence. In this example, in the official use only section of the EDR, you would check the box Notice of Late Registration. A voter is allowed to bring in a Minnesota driver's license or permit or ID that has been recently renewed with their yellow receipt. On the voided driver's license, you will check their photo that it matches the voter, as well as the voter's name. On the yellow receipt, check the application date as well as the date of birth. Also, verify the residential address on the yellow receipt against your precinct finder to be sure that their new address that they want to register with is in your precinct. Vouching is another way that a voter can register on Election Day. The instructions for this process, as well as tally sheets, are located in the EDR Judge folder. A voucher is an eligible voter who resides in the same precinct that can vouch for their residents. The voter should complete the EDR form. On the back of the EDR, the voucher should complete the information indicated there. The voucher will print their own name. They'll also need their voter ID number from the greeter list. The election judge can help with this step. Then they will print the name of the voter for which they are vouching for. And finally, the voucher will sign the back of that EDR form. An election judge must also sign and date the form. Finally, they'll complete the green voucher tally sheet. A voter is only allowed to vouch for 8 people. A different type of voucher is for employees of a residential facility. These employees can vouch for an unlimited number of voters who live in their facility. The residential facility's address must be located within your precinct. Once you've confirmed that, please follow the instructions as well as use the gray tally sheets that are located in the EDR Judge folder to complete this process. You'll print the residential facility's employee's name after they've shown you identification. You'll also print the name and address of the facility where these residents live. Next, you'll print the voter's name, and finally, the voucher or the employee will sign. An election judge also needs to sign this form and date it as well. Finally, complete the gray voucher tally sheet to track which voters these employees are vouching for. The following slides will show samples of proof of residence using a combination of items from Section A and Section B on the proof of residence form. This means that a voter does not have a form of ID with their current name and current address on it. For bills delivered electronically, original may mean a printed copy of the electronic bill or a display of the bill on the voter's electronic device. In order to register using this method, a voter must have one ID from the left column as well as a valid document from the right to show their residence. There's no need to memorize this list. The list on the previous screen is also located in your Election Judge folder and should also be kept out on the EDR Judge table. The voter's name must be on the bill or statement, and the due date must be within 30 days before or after the election. If a voter is using this form, you should complete Area C on the Official Use Only section of the EDR form. Please select the type of ID, write the ID number, as well as write the type of document that has been used. If a voter requests to have their name withheld from public information lists after they've registered, the voter will complete this form after they've completed their voter registration application. Inform the voter that their name will appear on rosters, but will not appear on public mailing lists. Please staple this request form to the back of the EDR application. You'll return both forms in the completed close of polls roster and EDR plastic bag at the end of the night. The Election Day registration judge is an important role in the polling location. Here are a few reminders. Please do not let a voter vote in the wrong precinct. If you need to, enlist the head judge to help them locate their correct precinct. And if together you can't figure out where they should be voting, feel free to call the Washington County Elections. Please also remember that commercial properties are not proof of residence and are not acceptable addresses to be used. Insurance documents and tax statements are also not valid to prove residency. After the voter has completed their EDR form, please confirm that the voter's date of birth indicates they are 18 years old, as well as that they are a U.S. citizen. One thing to check on a driver's license or a Minnesota ID is if the word status check is in the corner of their ID. This would indicate that the person is not a U.S. citizen and shouldn't be allowed to vote. An election judge, a voter, or an appointed challenger can challenge a voter's eligibility based on personal knowledge. If someone challenges another voter's eligibility, the challenger will complete the form shown on the screen. If this does happen, please call over your head judge for assistance. And if you have any questions, call Washington County Elections. If the challenged voter is able to provide a valid proof of residence, they should be allowed to vote. Before handing them a ballot receipt, have them complete the following steps. They should complete an Election Day registration form and sign the Election Day registration roster. You'll then make a notation on the incident log that they were a challenged voter who was able to resolve this challenge by showing a valid proof of residence. You'll attach the challenge form to the incident log page. Finally, attach a note to the voter registration application indicating they were a challenged voter but were able to resolve that challenge by showing you a valid form of residence. If a challenged voter is not able to provide proof of residence and does not vote, complete the following steps. If they've already completed an Election Day registration form, attach a note to that application that they were a challenged voter and that they did not vote. If they've already signed the EDR roster page, please cross out their name using a red pen. Then, make a notation on the incident log and attach the challenge form that the challenger signed and completed to the incident log page. Finally, attach a note to the Election Day registration application indicating what happens. A voter cannot vote without valid proof of residence. If a voter completes a voter registration application and signs the EDR roster, but they should have been voting at another location, or it was discovered they were already registered in your precinct, you will need to cross off the voter's name on the EDR roster in red pen. Please then put a note on the voter registration application stating that the voter was already registered or whatever the situation was noted on that application. If this isn't done, your signature counts to the voted ballots will be off. And if the voter signs again in your precinct or in another precinct, they will appear to have voted twice. The incident log is a valuable tool to record problems and their resolutions throughout the day and the polling place. One example might be if a voter is sent to another precinct after completing the voter registration form, as well as signing the EDR roster. You should cross off the voter's name in red pen on the EDR roster. The voter can then take their completed EDR application with them to their correct polling location. You'll want to make a note on the incident log and include the voter's name as well as a detailed account of the problem and the resolution. Some other situations that you'll record on the incident log are if a voter completes a voter registration application and signs the EDR roster, but then chooses not to vote for some reason. Please cross off the voter's name on the EDR roster page using a red pen and attach a note to the EDR application with an explanation of what happened. Then, make a note on the incident log and include the voter's name. Another situation that might come up is a voter completes a voter registration form and signs the EDR roster, but it is at that time discovered that they are not 18 yet. Please cross off the voter's name on the EDR roster using a red pen and attach a note to the voter's EDR application indicating they didn't vote but wanted to register. Then make a notation on the incident log and include the voter's name as well as any other details that might be important. There are a few steps you can do to get yourself ready for closing as the day goes on. Throughout the day, you may tally the signatures at the bottom of the EDR roster page. If the evening is slow, you can confirm you have documentation for each signature on the EDR roster page, as well as check your incident log to be sure you've documented any voters who left without voting. After 8 p.m. and after the last voter has moved through the precinct, count the EDR roster signatures and consult the EDR roster judge folder for further closing instructions. You'll have a number of forms. Please return unvoted voter registration applications in the canvas bag, paper-clipped to the back of the incident log page. This incident log should include notes about what happened with these Election Day registration applications, and notes about the situation should also be included on the applications themselves. In your EDR roster judge folder, you'll return instructions for the day, signs that were out on the table, as well as unused voucher forms, unused requests to withhold voter information from public lists forms, and unused challenge to a voter eligibility forms. Please write none on these forms and return them into the folder. Let your head judge know that none of these forms were used. Next, you'll put your completed EDR forms and roster pages into the close of polls EDR and roster plastic bag. Next, you'll return greeter lists and precinct finders in the plastic bag labeled Close of Polls, Greeter Lists, and Precinct Finders. Greeter lists contain data private information, so it's very important that we get those back on election night. Further instructions on closing the EDR table can be found in the EDR Judge folder. If you have any questions throughout the day, don't hesitate to call Washington County Elections. Thank you.